So, a couple of days ago, EU5 was officially announced, finally, and as I'm sure many of you guys have already seen, myself and other creators, we were allowed to make videos with our first impressions on EU5. However, as I'm sure you've also noticed, those videos were limited to 30 minutes max. Now, because of this limitation, I obviously rushed to tell you guys everything that I think is super important in such a short amount of time without going too much into how every single mechanic and every single system works, and generally my opinion on those mechanics and those systems. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing in today's video, ladies and gentlemen. We're once again going to go over everything that was sort of mentioned right there and more, but this time I'm going to be going way more in depth into the mechanics, into how things work, into how the game plays, and of course I'm going to be sharing my opinions on things that I like or things that I don't like, what should be kept the same, what should be changed. So let's jump in. Hey everyone, sorry I have to do this, but I need to take a second here to address some comments that Ludi has made about me and Lath that I think are uncalled for. I'd rather not do this in a public manner, but unfortunately Ludi's comments were made in a public manner, so I'm gonna do the same. Now, to be specific, you've said in your Discord that you're the only one that knows what he's doing, and in a video you've said that 80% of creators don't have a clue about what they're talking about, that they've never played past the first 20 years, once again insinuating that you're the only one with any authority to speak on the game and that your knowledge is paramount. Worse than that, in today's stream, you pointed at some creators that recommended Serbia for new players and said that they'd only recorded their videos the day before, that they only had 20 hours in the game, and that they were lying and it was disgusting, and they had no idea what they were talking about. Listen, as far as I'm aware, only me and Lath played Serbia for our videos, so I can't think of anyone else you will be talking about. And to be honest, I have a problem with you saying we're lying and that it's disgusting and that we have no idea what we're talking about, while at the same time, you claim to have over 200 hours in descriptions of videos as well as in your content, which would make you the most qualified to talk about the game. Listen, given that we had the game for exactly 2 weeks and that you had to travel, I call bullshit. Now, to let you guys know why I'm saying this in a video and not attempting to talk to Ludi about it in DMs, and not to bring up the past here, but Ludi, when you were copying Alzabo's content and putting other creators' channels in your video tags and in the description, and Alzabo tried to reach out to you in DMs to solve this issue privately, you deleted messages, changed the video tags, and pretended it never happened. And I'm not going to beat a dead horse here either by bringing up the whole Lambda situation. And this is not just me and Lath you're talking about here either. You're also speaking on other smaller content creators that might not want to risk upsetting someone with a massively bigger following than them, some of which honestly have expressed concerns to me privately in DMs. Once again, apologies to the viewers here for having to bring this up publicly, but Ludi, I really hope that the focus remains on the game, on its launch, instead of you trying to bring down other creators, whether they're larger or smaller than you. You listen, boys, we got a pretty good community here, probably the most normal creators and fans out of any Paradox game, let's be real here, so I really hope this doesn't escalate, and I really hope that these types of comments stop, because we all know over the years you've said things like this multiple times. Either way, boys, with all that said, let us get into some EU5. Before we get into it, boys, I just want to say, leave questions in the comments below about everything that you want to know about EU5 and anything that I might not mention in this video right here, because I obviously can't think of everything. So if you got EU5 questions, leave them in the comments below, and to the best of my ability, I'll answer them in a future EU5 video. So ask away. So here we are once again in EU5, ladies and gentlemen, but not really, because I'm just showing my video that I already showed last time. This is where we're gonna go over things because we aren't allowed to have any new footage and we don't have access to the game anymore either. But let's go ahead and jump right in, man. Obviously, I opened up the video with the country selection screen right here just to show up the map briefly. Now, what I didn't say in the video is, how do you get to this screen? Obviously, you start off in new game, and then when you select a new game, the game will give you a couple of options. You need to select how experienced do you think you are in the EU5 franchise or grand strategy games in general. You know, you can go from beginner all the way to expert, and then the game does take what you selected right there in order to suggest some countries for you later on. Now, after you select your experience level, the game will ask you, what type of player are you? And I'm actually going to scroll over to the automations to show that off. So the choices that you have in the what type of player are you are Conqueror, Explorer, Trader, and Gardener. Conqueror is obviously, you know, if you want to focus on wars and expanding and stuff like that. Explorer is mostly colonization and exploring. Trader is if you want to play like Merchant Republics, playing tall and stuff like that. And Gardener is once again another playing tall aspect for development, for building buildings and whatnot. So those are the 4 playstyles out of which you can pick 1 or 2. Now, something I don't like about that screen, and I obviously can't show it because I don't have footage of, something I don't like about that is that you have to pick one of those playstyles right there. And after you pick 1 or 2 of those playstyles, the game will automate whatever you didn't pick. So for example, you like conquering and exploring, let's say you're playing as Castile or something like that. Once you jump into the game, if you did end up choosing Castile, Trader and Gardener will automatically be automated for you. The game will have pre-automated those things for you. That is an aspect I don't like. And of course, based on your difficulty level that you chose and based on what type of playstyle, the game then suggests certain countries and certain different regions for you. But of course, you can just go and choose whichever country you want. So that is some of the things that you do before you get into this country selection screen right here. Now, after you get past all of that, you will enter this screen right here in which we have found ourselves in. And if you hover over a certain country, like I already mentioned briefly in the video, it'll give you sort of a brief rundown without having to select the country. This is not a feature that's in EU4, and it is something I do like quite a lot. Just at a quick glance, okay, this is their culture, this is their religion, this is the type of country they are, cool. And then if you want, you can click on it and, you know, learn more about it. And I'm going to show you that right there. For example, in my video, the later half of it, I was showing off the gameplay as Serbia. And for example, if you do select Serbia or whatever country you do select, it's going to open up this screen right here where it offers you a lot more information about the country. Obviously, it's going to drop down this flavor text right here, which countries in EU4 already have this as well. It is very nice in EU5 too. And then you have certain things over here that it lets you know about the country. Now, something that the game presents right here that I don't really think is that relevant is this massive ruler portrait right here. Now, obviously, we all have our opinions on these ruler portraits, the 3D generated, or I don't know if they're generated, but the 3D portraits of rulers. This is something I don't really care about. I didn't like them at the start because I felt that it made the game look cheap, but with how non-relevant these guys are, and trust me, they're a little more relevant than EU4, but it's nowhere near to like Crusader Kings 3 or something like that. I don't feel like these guys should have that big of a, you know, representation on screen, especially since you don't really interact with the ruler that much more than you do in EU4, for example. So you have this right here. The most important things about this little screen that it pops up right here is these 2 numbers, which I'm going to touch on shortly. But then obviously it tells you the skills of your ruler ranging from 0 to 100 in every category. That's, I guess, an important part that you do want to see here. But, you know, there's really no point in having him here. Sure, it's nice to look at, but I really don't have too much of a strong opinion on that. Obviously, it tells you the country's primary culture, the population, which of course is super important, one of the main things you want to keep an eye out in the game, and then the primary religion, and then it gives you the culture breakdown right here, and the religious breakdown. Now, if we move on a little bit further, as you can see, I'm hovering on this over here. Events are actually a way bigger part of Europa Universalis 5 than they are in EU4. Sure, some events are nice, and you're like, hey, if I play as Florence, I'll get the Da Vinci event, or something like that, you know, or if I play as Castile and Aragon, I'll get the event to PU the other and whatnot. So there are certain events that we like and that we keep in mind when playing nations in EU4, but events are really just there. Yeah, now let's be real, as nice as the text is on those, 90% of people don't even read that. They just look at the options, look at the modifiers that the options give you, and that's it. So this might not be too relevant, even though it is quite a big source of flavor. As you can see, Serbia, for example, has got 27 events. Now, the other option that we hover over right here is country bonuses, and this is the reason you would pick a certain country in EU5, right? In EU4, we pick countries on, you know, based on how strong they are or where they are on the map. And sure, you do this here too. But then you also think to yourself, okay, what kind of mission tree does France have in EU4, for example? What are France's national ideas? And national ideas are what makes the nations unique in EU4. Now, obviously, there are systems like that in EU5. But to get back to this, it tells you the following advances, laws, reforms, and units. Okay, so you know, some of these things are unique, those things. But what are they, right? For a new player that's just starting off Europa Universalis 5, and it is great that it shows you this up right here, but I think it could be vastly expanded. Okay, so let's say someone decides to play Serbia. Serbia has Home of the Hussars. What is Home of the Hussars? It has the rebirth of the patriarchy. What is the rebirth of the patriarchy? Is it a unique advance? Is it a law? Is it a government reform? Is it a unit? Obviously, it's not a unit, but you get what I'm saying. So I think this right here, man, maybe should be like a clickable menu, and then it opens up one more right here and it tells you, okay, these are your advances. And it tells you home of the Hussars is an advance. It gives you that modifier. For example, I don't know, 10% cavalry combat ability or cavalry power, whatever it's called in EU5, right? It tells you all the advances. Okay, so I know, Serbia has 12 unique advances, for example. Then it has 3 unique laws. It has 1 unique government reform. It has 2 unique units. So it does tell you the unique things, but until we learn what these are, we won't know what they are, right? So something I think could be massively improved on this screen right here is opening this menu up, which is the most important one, and the game telling you what every single one of these things is. Now, moving on further from that, once you go ahead and select your country, you will be greeted with obviously this screen right here, and this is where you first encounter the EU5 UI. Now, I think by this point, man, once the public, the future players have taken in EU5 and everything that we and Paradox have explained about it, I think some of the biggest points of discussion are the UI and missions. And of course, we will get to missions later, but right now, since this would be your first encounter with the UI, let's talk about the UI a little bit. Very controversial so far. So the first complaint that I've seen from people is, or not complaint really, but the first feedback that people have about the UI is that they don't like it. And I wasn't really too much of a fan of the UI, especially when it got presented in the dev diaries way back when, but once I actually got into EU5 and I played it, I actually don't have a bad opinion on the UI. Now, I'm gonna tell you some things right here that I think could be changed for the better. Obviously, I'm not a UI designer or anything like that, so I don't know if that is objectively good, but these are just my opinions. So, this is the UI, man. Up top left, the first thing you're gonna see is your ruler. Now, seeing your ruler right here, sort of front and center, the first thing you encounter, I feel like it's a bit misleading. This is not Crusader Kings 3. This guy isn't that relevant to warrant his own spot on the main screen right here, right? And I'll go into the ruler later and you'll see why I don't think that's that relevant. But the first thing that can be done right here, according to me, is get rid of the ruler. We don't need to see him right there. Enlarge the flag like this. And there we go. The flag can take up both the ruler and the flag in this empty spot right here. Next, moving on from here, we have that we're playing as the Kingdom of Serbia. Obviously, we know which nation we're playing as, right? I mean, we just picked that nation, so, and we see ourselves on the map the entire game. So I really don't think there's a need for this to be up here. Sure, it does give you the full name, the Kingdom of Serbia, which there's no room for it on the map, but I don't think there's a need for that to be right there. I think you could also get rid of the name of the country right here and maybe move all of these icons up here, right? As a sort of more squared off buttons or something like that. Although, I'm not too sure about that. Maybe these buttons from the right, since they're all like kind of miscellaneous things, you could move those over there or put these up top, move those under them. Or maybe you can have this instead of Kingdom of Serbia be the age, the age of traditions, the age of Renaissance, revolutions and whatnot. So you don't have anything up on the right here and it's just the outliner and it's nice and clean. Next, moving on, aside from that, I don't have too much of a gripe. A positive thing I will say about this is that I do like, that this right here changes based on the region and culture and religion and type of country that you're playing. So this right here, the background will be different for every nation, although I do think blue makes it look a little bit cheap, I do like this a lot though. I do like these things over here quite a lot, and I do like the background, although I'm not sold on this blue. Next, once you start looking at things right here that are relevant to your game, we have the estates. Now sure, the estates are more front and center in EU5 than in EU4, especially because you have a population, and every single one of those people in your population belongs to a certain estate. You would think that you do play a lot more with estates in EU5 than in EU4, and you do, but I feel like they still don't need to be the first things you see, right? For example, you got the nobles, you got the clergy, you got the burghers and the peasants, and every other country will have its own estates right here, more or less, and then you have sort of the power share breakdown between them and the crown. And another thing is, if you're gonna put all the estates up there, why not include the crown too? I mean, it's not really an estate, it's the crown, but if these guys are here, that should be there as well. Moving on to what I was going to say earlier, this shouldn't be here, I think, from gold all the way to sailors over here. It should be swapped between them and the estates. And the estates can go right here, right? So I do think all of these things are more important than estates. Maybe not in the early game, but later on, you probably won't even care about the estates, just how it is in EU4, and you take away their power, right? So I don't think these guys need to be here. So that's my opinion on sort of this main screen UI right here. Outliner is decent. I don't think it's better than EU4's, but I think it's great, and we'll get used to it and it'll get improved. And then down here you have like the international organizations and the shortcuts and whatnot. And then of course, all the way on the bottom, you do have the various map modes, which I've opened up right now. And there you guys can see them. I do think they're a little bit small, and I don't like that you have to pin them. Otherwise, they're not there, and it'll take a little bit of getting used to, but the maps are all right. The maps are all right. And of course, the notifications I absolutely love because they've stuck with the same system from EU4, the best notification system in any Paradox game. Man, it feels so good talking about everything without having without being limited by time. But yeah, if you guys are enjoying this second EU5 video as well, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we have a lot more EU5 content coming up before it releases, and when it does, of course, even more. But now let's move on. Now, moving on to each element of the UI right here and all of these tabs within your country and stuff like that, it's time to break that down. So once you click on the ruler right here, and we've already established that he doesn't really even need to be there, once you click on the ruler, it does give you things that you can do with him. Obviously, way more than in EU4, but still not that important to where these guys are presented as so important, right? You can see his current role, which of course is the ruler, kind of redundant, obviously, of Serbia. This is, you know, his age, the culture he belongs to, and these are his traits. Traits unlock in the same way they do in EU4. You know, some of these guys have more or less depending on how long they've ruled. And this is his dynasty. If you click or hover over this, it'll tell you like which dynasty he belongs to, how many members of the dynasty there are. For example, I don't know, you're playing as the Habsburgers or something. Obviously, they're not as powerful in EU5, but you get the point. And you see, okay, so that guy is this guy's cousin. He's in charge of, I don't know, Poland or whatever, right? You get the deal with the dynasty, like the Anjous that are in Naples and Hungary, for example. You see that. So that is good. I do like that it has way more information about the dynasty. That is a feature I love quite a lot. Obviously, over here are his stats again, his culture, the estate he belongs to, which of course he would be a part of the crown since this is a monarchy, but with different countries, with republics or whatnot, you know, they might belong to the burghers or something. Or if you're playing as the Pope, he'd belong to the clergy maybe, or maybe it will be the crown, or, you know, the bishoprics, the clergy. It's different. I like that as well, showing us what you know, estate a ruler belongs to. Obviously, here's the religion, his father and his mother, which aren't that relevant because these guys are before the game. Then you can see the spouse or spouses and the child or children. And then down here, we have the things you can do with your ruler. Obviously, you can arrange a royal marriage between yourself and, you know, a noble or a dynasty member of a different country. You can abdicate if you've ruled long enough and if you have an heir. If you don't have, if you can't secure a royal marriage, you could marry a lowborn, you could marry a noble. All of these options that happen in EU4, but now you can do them intentionally, which is something I do like quite a lot. And of course, you can appoint him as a general, as an admiral, or he can even be in the cabinet, depending on, you know, the country and stuff like that. So these are nice things to expand upon the ruler system. Way better than EU5, obviously, but I'm once again gonna go back. He doesn't need to be here. He doesn't need to be here. He's not that relevant. Obviously, if you hover on all of these right here, you can see the bonuses that his skill level gives you based on certain things. And EU4 it just gave us mana. But for example, Stefan Uroš right here, his 81 admin skill gives us plus 40% admin cabinet actions bonus, or minus 40% higher advisor cost. His 77 diplomatic ability you know, gives us a diplomatic cabinet action bonus, and I'll get into the cabinet actions later, but we know from this, obviously, some are admin-based, some are diplo-based, and some are mill-based, right? And it gives us a discount on hiring artists. His military ability, once again, another bonus to military cabinet actions, but also it makes it 45% cheaper for us to train generals and admirals. This guy is really strong at the start, obviously, so all of these bonuses that we get from him are super, super nice. Now that we've taken a look at the ruler, if you click on the country flag up here, or if you click over here, it'll take you to this screen right here, which is the government tab. Now, within the government tab, there are lots of different things, and we'll go ahead and break them down one by one. The first tab that the game will take you in is the country tab right here. So over here, it tells you your capital, which is Prizren, which is right here. It tells you that you're a monarchy. It tells you that you're a tier 3 country, which would be a kingdom. Now, we're going to touch on formables as well when I click the formables button right here, and I'm going to get into it, but you can only form a higher tier country. For example, Serbia, I'm going to get into that later as well. Once you conquer a portion of Byzantium, you become an empire, which is a tier 4 country, which means you can't like culture shift as Serbia and form France for its missions or something like that. Not that there are missions, but a higher tier country can never form a lower tier country, even if you go into this screen right here. Now, over here, it does give us some other things from when you click on the character, just at a quick glance, which is, once again, two different things. I mean, the same thing in two different areas, but, you know, it's not a big deal. And then down here at the bottom, you will see the estates, which is the crown, first of all, which is in itself an estate itself, but not really. Then you have the nobles, which, you know, these guys do have different names based on which country they're from. If the country has flavor, for example, it's the Vlastela right here in Serbia, the Clare, the Meštanstvo, the Seljanstvo, you get the point. But once you go over into these estates and you take a look at them on first glance, I think there are certain things here that are scary for first-time players, right? You've never played EU5, you've only played EU4, you jump in as, for example, Serbia, and you think to yourself, wait, the nobles have 8 privileges? I mean, the max you can get in EU4 is like 5, and some guys can get 6 and whatnot, but the nobles starting off with 8 privileges? That's crazy, right? Now, that's a thing I am not a fan of. I gotta say right here, that's the first thing I'm gonna touch on, then we'll break each estate down. But, you know, we already know that there are estates in EU4 that start off with certain privileges, right? For example, you got the French strong duchies privilege for France because they got more vassals, right? You got those negative ones as Byzantium to represent the hard start for Byzantium. And I think those things could still be included in EU5, but just like they are in EU4, you know? So maybe there is some historical thing that the Serbian nobles were powerful with, and you can have one privilege for them like that that is hard to take away, right? But, you know, these guys starting up with 8 right here. I've seen HRE nations with 10 burger privileges. Like, I feel like that's too intimidating, and these are really hard to get rid of. They cost like 100 stability to get rid of. So, you know, these guys got things in power that you would potentially never give them out yourself as a player. So I do think this is sort of locking us into certain decisions. So not a fan of all the estates or certain estates starting with so many privileges. I get that it's a way to represent their power at the start of the game and how powerful they were in a certain country. But I think if we go back to the EU4 model of only certain countries having certain 1 to 3 privileges enacted, I think that's way better and way less intimidating. And then moving on, you can see a certain estate's power right here. That's that little lightning bolt. As we can see, the crown is super weak for Serbia right at the start, and the nobles have 66% power. That's a breakdown of 100% between all the estates and the crown. The nobles are super powerful. After that, over here, you can see how many people in your population belong to that certain estate. Obviously, the nobles will always be the least. Then it's the clergy and the burghers with about the same sort of ratio, depending on what type of country you're playing. And then, of course, most of your population, and 90-something%, is going to belong to the peasants. So that's how many people there are. And then you have the estate satisfaction. As we can see, you know, this right here, the little mask with the circle, is how satisfied they are. And this is the current satisfaction. And this on the right is what it's leaning towards. We already have this from EU4. That's their, you know, satisfaction equilibrium. So these guys, for example, are, you know, it's pretty much all the same since we have it on pause, but these guys will go from 75.37 to 75.38 over time. Obviously, if the difference is huge, it's going to take a while, but this is pretty much the same as with EU4. Now, here we are in the crown estate right here. So this is what it looks like when you open up the crown, and it's different for the crown. That's why I say it's like a quasi estate, because you don't give the, and that's a very nice screenshot of me right there, but if you open up the crown estate, you don't have privileges. Instead, this is where government reforms are. Now, a lot of you, if you've been watching the channel, you will know that government reforms are one of my favorite things about EU4. And I do like that there are so many unique ones on every level, and that you research them, not really research them, but, you know, you gain reform progress and you go one by one. For example, you pick the second one, and it has to do with your armies. The third one, it has to do with, you know, internal management. Fourth one is religious. But over here, it's different. Obviously, there are some we can unlock right at the start, some that we can't. And think of the first reforms that you take as sort of your tier 1 and maybe 2 government reforms. So for example, we jump in as Serbia. We would choose autocracy because, as we just saw, crown power is super low. And you're already familiar with autocracy from EU4. It's pretty much the same thing over here, just with different bonuses. And then you might want to take autocracy and agricultural cultivation because food is super important at the start of the game before the Black Death is about to hit. If you want to do vassal playing, or if you want to do a Diplo playthrough, you could not go with autocracy. You could go with diplomatic traditions. If you're playing as a, if you're playing as a, clerical state, you might want to go enforce religious adherence, right? You might want to do feudal nobility. If you're doing subjects, there are various sort of tier 1 government reforms, let's call it like that, when you open up the crown. So this is where government reforms are in the crown estate. They're not really privileges, they're reforms. Now, I've jumped ahead over here to where I'm already playing as Serbia so I can show off some of the, the estate interactions and the privileges and stuff like that. But something you may notice over here is that now that I've given the crown these reforms, you might be able to see this super tiny timer on it, those sand clocks or whatever you call them, and you can see that a circle is loading around it. This is a big part of EU5, how nothing, or pretty much almost nothing, is instant, like it is in EU4, like in EU4, you conquer a province, you core it, it takes 2 years to core it, then you full state it instantly, and then you lower autonomy instantly from like 90 to like 70 to like 50, and then once you click that minus button, it goes down to almost 0. So that's all instant. For example, over here, we can see that even though we've taken these government reforms, it will take a bit of time until they're fully implemented. So for example, agricultural cultivation gives us plus 10% food production or whatever, but it's not going to be instant. It's going to start from 0, and it's nice voice crack, by the way. It's going to start from 0, and it's slowly going to climb up over time to 10, to what the maximum thing you can get from it actually is. Then over here, you will see me hover over certain privileges that the nobles already have. Like I just mentioned a little bit ago, it is really expensive to take these away. 85 stability to revoke a privilege is huge. It's massive. You guys have no idea how much stability that is. But for example, we can see right here, the nobles already have land rights. It makes them 5% happier and 50% more powerful, right? Now, that doesn't mean this is going to go up to 117%, right? But based on all of those things, joint, it does implement a certain amount of power, and it gives us plus 5% tax efficiency and monthly progress towards aristocracy, which are the cultural values right here. We'll get into that later. Let me see. I think I hover on some more estate privileges right here. For example, fortification licenses for fort maintenance, this right here for military tactics, and all of these privileges, not only do they give us bonuses, but all privileges also steer us towards a certain cultural value on 2 ends of the spectrum. We'll get into that very soon right here. And as we can see, some icons right here are obviously work in progress. I do know that Serbia, for example, has quite a lot of bonuses for fort defense and stuff like that. So a very defensive country. But those are all the nobles privileges. As we can see, I didn't get into them because there's already quite a lot of them. However, we have gotten into the clergy privileges right here, so you can just see some of them. There's not really too much things to explain right here. This is how happy it makes them. That's how powerful it makes them. This is the bonus that it'll give you, and this is the value that it'll steer you towards. Pretty simple. I feel like very easy to explain. The only thing is, like I just said, privileges are extremely hard to get rid of. And that's pretty much it for estates. Everything else that I could tell you about these guys is pretty much showing off the privileges, which I'm sure you guys want to see some, but there's really no point. There's nothing I could explain about them. Let's move on now to the parliament, another super important mechanic in EU5 that I have sort of, I have different opinions on it. I'm not sure if I like it, but then I also do like it, but I'm not sure if every country should have a parliament, because every country does have a parliament. So the way parliament works in EU5 is that you're able to call it every 5 years, or, after the start of the game, whenever the last time the country called it was in the past before the game started. And then, as you can see, things we can see right here are parliament requests. And you might see, we need 50% support for these or whatever, but that's actually not the case. This is how much these things cost. So you ask the parliament for these things. When you call the parliament, you will see an option pop up right here of certain things we could do. And the way you kind of play the parliament right now is you look for the option with the biggest support at the start. Something that would be at 40-ish, 50-ish% support before you even pick it, because you can see the support obviously before you pick it. And then once you pick that thing that you want the parliament to do, let's say it's at 40-something%, you can once again give trade-offs right here so the guys support you more, just like it is in EU4. For example, in EU4 you can give 300 sailors, and then in turn that province supports the issue as well. Over here it's different. It'll ask you like maybe to improve relations with someone, or to repeal a law, or something like that. But once you do get above 50% support in the parliament, then you actually can request one of these things, because these things cost 50 support. And the way you do it is you pretty much do what I just said, and then you ask the parliament to prepare for war. Once you click prepare for war right here, the support will drop by 50% on whatever issue you were debating, but you will be able to get an insulted us CB on whichever nation you want. And that's the main way you use CBs right now, at least in the version that we got in EU5. So you would do that, you would get an insulted us CB on Bosnia right here, and then you would go and fight them. However, with the insulted us CB, you can take 100% less, which means you're not even able to full annex Bosnia here as Serbia at the start of the game. You can take like 2/3 of it, I would say. That's just one example right there. So that's how the parliament works. Now, going back to another thing I said at the start of this segment, I don't think every country should have a parliament, right? Certain countries that historically had parliaments, sure, or, you know, just how it is in EU4, basically, that's how I think it should be in EU5. I do not think every country should have a parliament. Now, you could think of it as sort of, okay, it's not really a parliament. Maybe it's the ruler calling all his most trusted advisors and asking them, yo, what should we do? What do the people want us to do? And stuff like that. So you could role play it a little bit in your head that it's not really the parliament, but I don't like that every country has a parliament, and that right now the only reason you use these guys is to get an insulted us CB on someone next to you so you can fight them instead of no CBing them. There we go. That's all I can mention about the parliament right here. You can see when the last time it was called, the base support, and then all of those other things right here that I just mentioned. And there we go, a little hover over the prepare for war screen right here, basically telling us it'll give us a legitimate insulted us CB, and that's the support for the current issue that we'll lose if we ask the parliament to prepare for war. Now, here we are in the cabinet, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said in the previous video, and as I'm sure many other creators have also said, probably the most important mechanic in EU5 right now. This is how you do every single thing in the game. Most countries start off with 2 cabinet seats, which, trust me, is so little. I know Florence starts off with 3, and the Ottomans start off with 3 as well, but they do get a 4th one 2 or 3 years into the game after you get your unique Ottoman government reform and stuff like that. So this is how you do everything, man. First of all, you will notice the cabinet efficiency right here, not very good, and the cabinet seats. And there are cabinet actions and then cabinet ministers. The closest thing we can compare to this from EU4 is advisors. That's all the way you can look at it, but it's so different. It's not just hire an advisor that gives us that bonus, right? You do the action, and then you get a cabinet member, which would be good to do that action based on the ability, right? So it's either an admin action, a diplo action, or a mill action. If it's a mill one, you select a cabinet member with high mill stats to do it, and we'll get into it right now with some of the cabinet actions right here. So a first one right here, and we are going to go into all of these in depth because all of them are super important. There's about a dozen of them. Change societal values. A diplo action, once you do this, it'll steer you towards a certain societal value by 0.1 per month, right? And we will get into the values later, and you will understand what I'm talking about with that. Then we have develop a province. You're not really going to be using this since it's so little. Yes, development does exist in EU5. Obviously, it's not like EU4. It's a whole different concept, but not too much to touch on this one. Then you have diplomatic endeavors, plus 25% improved relations, and plus 2 diplo rep. This would be good for securing alliances, for securing diplo vassalizations and whatnot, improving relations with outraged countries and whatnot. Pretty simple. You have encourage migration, where, as you can see, plus 50% pop migration speed and plus 1 migration attraction, basically to encourage people to move in to a certain province. Let's say it depopulated because of war or because of the plague, or it's just a great province and you want people to move into there because you want to build more buildings in there or whatnot. And then you have the expel people, thing right there, which is basically, you know, the opposite of encourage migration. You kick people out of a certain province, right? That's kind of like culture conversion, but not really. Let's call it like expel minorities in EU4, that it used to kick out a certain culture from that province off to the New World. This is pretty much, you can choose to expel people out of a certain province. Then over here we have foster a new culture. This is pretty much, it makes you create an entirely new culture, right? Obviously, we can see it takes so long to fully implement, like 10 years right here. Not something you'll really be doing too often, but it is there. Then we have increased control. Another very important cabinet action right here that you probably want to do while you're at peace, or if you're not integrating provinces. I will touch on control pretty soon. Let me just go ahead and find the map mode right here so I can explain it better for you guys. So this is the control map mode right here, and control in EU5 radiates out from your capital, your seat of power, right? That is the white province, and it'll always be, for example, your capital at the start of the game. So as we can see right now, the location of Prizren right here, which is our capital, is at 100 control. That's the seat of power. That's where we are the most dominant. And as you can see, it radiates out from your capital. So control is still pretty high right here. As we can see, 60, 70, 80%, very near our capital. But as we get further away, or if we're blocked off by, let's say, impassable terrain or difficult to get through terrain like mountains, and if there's no roads, control will be lower. So as we can see in these sort of border locations right here, we have very low control. 15 control. So these guys over here, you know, to imagine it in a roleplay fashion, they're almost doing whatever they want, right? But as you go nearer to your capital, you increase control. Now, there are other ways to increase control. I'm going to get to that when we get to that map mode. But basically, going back to this right here, something you do at the start is you increase control, for example, in your entire capital province and provinces and locations that are near to it, because obviously control is like autonomy in EU4, except the opposite. In EU4, 0 autonomy is good. In EU5, 100 control is good. You get the point. This is a pretty important action. And then you have integrate province, okay? Imagine this like coring from EU4, except way more difficult. And I'm going to break that down as well. For example, as Serbia, we all know by now that you do get an event to conquer certain provinces from Byzantium right at the start. Once you do conquer them, those provinces will start integrating themselves slowly, right? They will do it by themselves anyway, but you do also want to integrate them to speed it up. It takes a really, really long time. And it also depends on the religion and on the culture of the province that you've conquered. For example, if you conquer like all of this from Byzantium as Serbia, these northern provinces that are closer to you are faster to integrate. They take about 20 to 30 years, and that's because they're a similar culture, they're a similar religion, so it's really not that bad. But if you conquer these ones down here, where it's pretty much all Greeks over there, and since right now Greek has more cultural influence than Serbian, these provinces down here take until the 1700s to integrate. Of course, that's without any different modifiers you might get and stuff like that. But as soon as you start integrating it, you will see that it'll take up until the 1700s. Obviously, it's not really going to take that long, but you get what I'm saying. That is probably the most important action that you do with the cabinet. Then down here, we can see Unify Culture Group. Pretty self-explanatory. We got sort of a thing like that in EU4 with the ability to, like, let's say with Muscovy, to integrate the West Slavic cultures and the South Slavic cultures into the Slavic culture group. You know, it's sort of similar like that, but not really, because then you unify the entire culture group into a single culture. And then down here, we have Promote Culture. Basically, you know, you assimilate other people into a culture of your choosing. This is pretty much culture conversion, although it is super slow. You get assimilation. There's not really an abstract concept to explain right here. And then you have Convert Province, which is religious conversion. Pretty much the same thing, you know, with the religion, not with the culture. And as we can see at the start of my playthrough right here as Serbia, I've chosen to increase control in Kosovo, which is sort of like this province right here, and then to stabilize the country, because increasing stability at the start of the game is super important. So those are sort of the actions that you do at peace. And by now you've noticed which ones you do at peace, which ones you do after wars and whatnot. But yeah, this, ladies and gentlemen, probably the most important mechanic in EU5. Everything goes to the advisors. That's why the game feels sort of slow at the start, because you can only do so much. And that's one of the reasons the Ottomans, in my opinion, are the most fun country at the start, because they do start off with 4 of these slots right here, so you can expand rapidly. And then we go into the laws tab right here. Not too much to take a look at this. You're pretty much familiar with laws already from different Paradox games and kind of from EU4, but not really. You got religious laws, military laws, admin laws, socioeconomic laws, and estate laws. I don't think I've opened any of these up to showcase them right here in this video, but it's pretty much, you know, what you pick at the start, you know, from which age to which age people serve in the levies, which estate maybe controls mining, how is mining done, how much we're exploiting, you know, food production, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. There are various laws you can pick. It also tells you your court language right here, which is more of a flavor type thing, and admin efficiency, basically how much, you know, how well those laws work. Now, moving on to the values right here, another super important mechanic in EU5. You might be familiar with systems like this from like Victoria 2 or EU3, and you have certain things right here that the country that you pick already starts off in a certain direction, but based on everything you pick and based on your playstyles and the kind of cabinet actions that you do and the estate privileges you give, it'll steer one way or another. Now, the most important one, centralization versus decentralization right here. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. Most countries, I think you would like to play centralized, maybe unless you're doing a super huge country like a massive blobbing horde like the Golden Horde or maybe even Yuan. There are benefits to going decentralized, but for a normal playthrough, I think most people would go centralized. Then you have traditionalist versus innovative, basically, you know, based on the laws, on the tech and stuff like that. Spiritualist versus humanist, how much you're leaning towards a religious playthrough, let's call it. Aristocracy versus plutocracy, once again, based on the trading and based on the estate power. Serfdom or free subjects, how many privileges your peasants have, how many things you allow them to do. This, of course, all is different based on the government type of the country. Belligerent and conciliatory right here, quality versus quantity, offensive, defensive, you know, there are a couple of mill ones as you can see, naval ones down here, land and naval. You got capital economy or traditional economy, and individualism versus communalism. I've showed off many things so far that you guys noticed that sort of steer you towards some of these values right here. And if you can notice, the little yellow icon right there is what we're leaning towards, right? For example, the Serbia starts off this way towards serfdom, but with certain privileges that we've given these guys, now we've started to lead more towards free subjects, right? Same deal with offensive and defensive. We can see Serbia starts off this way towards offensive, but with all of these bonuses that I showed off earlier, with fort defense and stuff like that, and it really is meant to be played kind of defensively, we will start leaning towards that way. And obviously, you know, let me see if I hover over some of these. There we go. I hover over decentralization, for example. When it is maxed out, it scales up to all of these things right here. So for now, because this is at sort of halfway towards decentralized, we gain about half of these positive and negative modifiers. You get how it works, and based on your playstyle, you would choose what to lean towards. Obviously, none of this is instant. It's all very slow, and it's over time, although there are many ways to speed these things up. And of course, you will be choosing these based on your playstyle. It's pretty simple, but a very important mechanic. And then we get to the missions, ladies and gentlemen, probably the second most discussed in a negative light aspect about EU5 after the whole UI thing. And I really don't get why some of you don't like the AI that much. I think it's fine. Could it be better? Yes, but it's really not that bad. You have the missions. Now, in this screen right here, we can see that there are no missions available with the search criteria, but that's because I haven't selected any of these, right? Once you click this right here, or this right here, or this right here, or this right here, the game opens up certain missions based on that playstyle, right? If you click the Conqueror button right here, it'll give you like 3 different missions or mission branches or whatever that you could do that are based on conquering. These work nothing like in EU4, although I do know that this system is being worked on, so I don't think these will be like this in the final release version, although I have no certain way of knowing or saying that, so take that with a grain of salt. So missions right now, man, you guys might know them from Imperator. They're not really relevant, and Lathe put it very well. They're sort of meant as like a mini tutorial slash guidance, right? For example, if you pick the Conqueror missions, the game will tell you, okay, gather up a treasury, like gather up 300-400 ducats, so you're kind of like ready to go to war. And then, you know, once you fight, it'll tell you to raise the levies. So once you do raise the levies, the game will be like, good job, you raised the levies, right? So they're sort of meant like a guidance. You're really not gonna do them. There's no real reason to do them right now. Let's say the game released tomorrow. Most people wouldn't play with this. My opinion is also pretty strong on this topic. I think I might have mentioned this in a video in the initial one, I'm not sure, but when dynamic missions were introduced to EU4 a couple of years ago, right? Branching missions, sorry, not branching, but dynamic ones. Either this mission is that or that. For example, when you're playing as Persia, you either get 2 or 3, let's say, Sunni, Shia, or Zoroastrian missions, right? So I really thought that would be the basis for missions in EU5. Now, nothing crazy, like completely different mission trees that certain countries in the Baltic have in EU4, what you call it. But I really thought that the whole dynamic mission system would be a sort of a tester for EU5, right? For example, if a certain nation has 30 missions, they don't all have to be dynamic, but let's say you get someone like Brandenburg and, you do the whole Prussia thing with them. Let's say there's 2 missions. If you do end up being Protestant, or if you're staying Catholic, or maybe as Byzantium, if you could flip to the, the Latin Empire or something like that, then you get like 4 or 5 Latin Empire missions, 4 or 5 non-Latin Empire. You get what I'm saying. So missions, I'm not satisfied with them right now either. Mission trees are, of course, a lot of people's favorite part about EU4, and I do hope that the team will reconsider. I know one of the reasons they're not doing missions like that is they don't want to railroad you that much. They don't want to steer you towards a certain playstyle. So if a fine balance can be struck, I'm all for it. But right now, man, missions in this current build at least are pretty much irrelevant. That's my opinion on missions. Then we go into the economy tab, the second one right here. And this video is already pretty long, but actually it's going to be even longer, boys, trust me. So economy tab, one of the more important screens that you're going to be checking very, very often. And I'm going to break it down for you. This is our current inflation. Right now we're losing inflation because we're not minting anything. Tax efficiency, most countries don't have this very high at the start, but with this current build, you're not really gonna care about making money from taxing. Most of your income is gonna come from trade, although I do assume that that's gonna be changed by release because trade is pretty powerful right now. So you can mint money, basically a tiny way to get a little bit of money. You generally don't want to mint more till when it gives you inflation. So you want to mint till about 0.00. Then you have the nobles tax. This is how much you could tax them to the max in theory, but as we can see, because this button is grayed out, the nobles are so powerful to where you can't tax them more than this. In fact, we can't tax them at all. And these little cogs right here are basically automating it. The game will auto tax that estate for you based on what it thinks is good. Same thing for the clergy right here. As we can see, we could tax them more, but they're already not happy. Same deal with the burghers and with the peasants right here. Then you have cost of the court. This is the primary way you increase legitimacy. As we can see right now, it's, where is it? Let me see it right there. It's 75, and we're increasing it by 0.31 a month. It is pretty easy to increase legitimacy, and it doesn't cost that much. Army maintenance, navy maintenance, fort maintenance, no reason to explain this, you're familiar. And then you have diplomatic spending. Now, diplomatic spending or diplomats work differently in EU5. They're not a couple of guys like in EU4 that you send around to do certain things, but this is how much it sort of costs for you to do certain diplomatic actions, and this is how much you increase it or decrease it per month. So, for example, right now we have 5 diplomats as Serbia. Think of it like that. If we royal marry an ally Bulgaria, let's say that goes down to 4, right? If we're improving relations with them, it costs 0.25, so it goes down to 3.75. You get the point. Every action that you do that's diplomatic, like improving relations, spying, and every relation that you do, like royal marriages and alliances and stuff like that, all costs diplomatic. I think it will be diplomatenance. It would be better to call this rather than diplomats. And then you can increase it or decrease it right here based on how much you need to use, right? Obviously, bigger nations will be able to have more of those things because they're bigger and they need to do more. Smaller nations, you're going to be pretty limited. And then you have stability. This is another way to increase stability, along with, the cabinet members and stuff like that. It is pretty expensive, but you do want to do it right at the start, especially before the Black Death comes around, because, and I'm going to touch more on that later, a lot of the actions within the Black Death situation cost stability. So that's pretty much the economy screen right there. At least the balance, very simple. We can see our tax base right here, our loans pretty small at the start, and they are 10% loans. And this is basically our net income, income minus the expenses. Pretty simple for the balance sheet. Then here we are in the markets, ladies and gentlemen, probably the best received feature about EU5 based on the comments that I'm reading so far. A lot of people like the way markets work. They're not obviously like in EU4 where trade goes from one market to another. There's no steering involved or anything like that. And markets work very differently to trade nodes compared to EU4. So let me break it all down for you. As we can see right now, we are in the market map mode. The ones that are colored in are the ones that, for example, we as Serbia right here in this specific example can reach. Those are other markets we can trade with from our own market, but you'll also notice right down here has presence. So these are the markets that we as Serbia have presence in. Mainly, as you can see, it's the Dubrovnik market centered in Ragusa. And then we have a couple of provinces up north over here that belong to the Pest market. Basically, those provinces trade with the Pest market. To give you a real life example, a guy lives here, he makes apples, he sells them on this market. He needs pears, he buys them on this market. It's based on proximity and market attraction, which I'll get into soon. So those are the markets we're present in, and we have a couple of provinces here that trade in the Constantinople market. Now, we have trade efficiency. Pretty simple, mechanic to grasp how efficient we are at the trade. Production efficiency, same thing. These are concepts to us familiar from EU4. Then we have a trade advantage. Currently, as we can see, it's pretty low. So that means that, for example, if you want to trade on this market right here, and once again, go back to the apples example, you want to sell your apples for a ducat. Ragusa also wants to sell their apples for a ducat because they are sort of the most powerful guys in this market. Their trade will have advantage. So even if you guys decide to sell them on the same day, let's say people will buy them from Ragusa because they have the advantage. So that's a way to break down that, mechanics, trade maintenance, and trade capacity. We don't have any right now because we're not doing anything. I'm going to get into that too. Market attraction is basically how attractive the main market you're in is. For example, this is the Dubrovnik market. Trade maintenance, it will be based on how many trades you're doing, and trade capacity is how many trades you can do. Now, because we're unpaused right here, and because we haven't built buildings that you want to build at the start of the game, like marketplaces, market villages, and whatnot, those give you trade capacity. The more trade capacity you have, the more trades you can do. And I'm going to show you this pretty soon right here. I'm going to scroll by. Then, of course, we have a trade range right here, how far we can reach, and the create market button. This is a pretty important one, and you do as most countries want to create your own market. For example, over here as, I'm trying to zoom in, that's why you see me increase the volume. For example, as Hungary, you're pretty much in the entire trade node of Pest right here, and the market is in Pest. So as Hungary, you wouldn't create a new market because you're already the big boss in the Pest market. However, a couple of years after the game, 7 or 8 years, once you've built up the relevant buildings, marketplaces, for example, or market villages, to make your market attractive, to make your trade capacity bigger, then boom, you click create new market. Now, with all of those buildings that you've built that increase your market attraction and trade capacity, a market will spawn right here, and it'll take over locations that are in other markets and add them to your market. For example, as Serbia here, if after 7 or 8 years we create our own market centered in our capital or in another super rich province, it would take away a huge portion of the Dubrovnik market. It would take away a pretty big portion of the Constantinople market, and probably a okay portion from the Pest market right here, and our, let's call it Prizren, which is our capital. The Prizren market would be fairly large right here, and then we start making even more money because we're buying and selling things on our own market, not on someone else's market like Dubrovnik or Constantinople or Pest. So that's how those things right there work. And of course, we're going to get into the trades as well. Let me just try and find that portion to where I actually do build those buildings as Serbia. So actually, here we are. As you can see, I've started constructing right here marketplaces in Prizren, in Skopje, in Niš, and various other provinces. These marketplaces, as you can see, they cost a certain amount of money at the time to construct them. The things you need to construct them over here you can see as well. And these things will give us more trade capacity. And when we do construct that market, or when we make our own market, all of these buildings that we've been building up so far will make our market super attractive. Our entire country will get into it, as opposed to it being split between different markets. And also provinces from other countries might enter our market as well. So my tip for that, at least right now, this might be changed until the end of the release. You do want to create your market after you've built up the relevant provinces, after about 7 or 8 or 10 to 15 years game time. Then we go into the trades right here, obviously, because we don't have any trades right now. We're not seeing anything, but if we did, these are the buttons that you scroll through the markets with. You're mainly going to make trades on the market you're most present in, obviously, but if we move this up and down, it'll show you trades from past and from Constantinople. This is where it'll show you your current trades. And the game will suggest trades for government needs, for building needs, for pop needs, and for profit. The ones that you want to do right at the start, at least right now, are the ones for profit, because that's how you make the most money. Sometimes trades for needs also bring in profit, but not necessarily. So that's why, for example, in the automation, which I'll touch on later, you can automate a trade. The game can do this automatically for you. However, the problem with that is that the game prioritizes different things than you would. The game would do trades for population needs, no matter if you make money or lose money on them. And trust me, it's not that bad for the pops to have certain small needs right here. Most of their needs will be satisfied, but the game will try to fulfill every single one of their needs. So at the start, you want to make your own trades, and then later on, once you balance things out, once you create your own market, and once you're rich enough, you can automate trading, and you don't have to worry about this where you don't actually care if you do a couple of trades that lose you money. So that is basically how the trading and how the markets and how everything works, at least right now. A vastly superior mechanic to EU5. I was sort of scared about this, not gonna lie, but once you've seen it, man, and once you've played it, there's no going back to the EU4 system. Trust me, an amazing mechanic. I love this quite a lot. It just needs to be balanced. That's it. Then we move on to the production tab, ladies and gentlemen, and we have buildings, goods, and food right here. This is something that can be automated as well. You can automate building construction, you can automate production methods, and there are literally hundreds of different buildings in the game. Some are for profit, for example. Some are, for making money. Some are for extracting goods. Others, there are buildings like forts. There are buildings like the bailiff, which increase control. There are armories and sergeantries, which give you more manpower or the ability to have standing armies, hospitals to deal with plagues and stuff like that. So there are lots of way more different buildings compared to EU4. I do love this quite a lot. One thing I don't think is necessary is for it to be so overcomplicated. For example, as you all know, in EU4, there's manufactories, right? And after you build a manufactory, then it has the flavor thing, right? So I don't think there's a need to have Naval Supplies Guild, Jewelers Guild, and whatnot. I think there should just be one guild, and after you build it in that certain province, or the game automatically builds it for you, or the burgers build it, whatever, then once you go in there, you can see, this is a Naval Supplies Guild. Now I see. So I think it's a little bit overcomplicated right here, and it might be a little intimidating to get used to, but it's really not a big problem. This is just personal preference. I don't think this is like an objectively bad thing, if you get what I'm saying. And that's pretty simple, man. Not a lot to say right here. You guys will slowly learn what are the good buildings to build, what are, irrelevant buildings. If you automate it, the game will build buildings for you. You can examine what they do. It's just buildings at the end of the day, man, although there are really good ones. Then we go into the goods map mode. Not a lot to say right here. Resource gathering operations you can construct. For example, this is the trade good. It tells you about, the price, how much there is in the certain market, supply, demand, if you want to exploit it more and whatnot. The goods are a similar system to EU4 where you don't just trade them, but you need to produce them as well. There we go. We can increase the RGO in this province. This can also be automated. You're not really going to be doing too much things manually with this. You're mostly going to be automating this stuff right here. But yeah, lots of different trade goods, man. And I'm so glad that they have been quite a lot expanded compared to EU4. And then the final tab in the production, tab right here is obviously the food. It gives you a breakdown literally by, by a province. It tells you which market it's in, how much it's using up, how good the food stockpile is. You do want to be stockpiling food before the Black Death hits, especially food is also pretty important for warfare, which I'll touch on later. And yeah, it's just food, man, a pretty important resource in EU5, especially now that we actually have a real population, and the game will let you know if you're lacking food. You can go ahead and buy certain things on the market and whatnot. But yeah, those are pretty much the things in the production tab. You build things, you get food, and you find ways to exploit all of the goods that you are producing in your country. Then we go on to the society tab, which has culture, religion and people, and you'll see why this is different. But yeah, it gives you a pretty simple breakdown of here: your primary culture, your court language, this is more flavor type stuff, cultural tradition, cultural influence, these are good to get up, assimilation rate. As we can see, we're not going to be very successful if we try to assimilate someone to the Serbian culture. And accepted cultures is not like slots like it is in EU4, it's more a capacity. As we can see right now, we're 115 out of 1, which does give us a slight negative modifier, but that's only because we're tolerating Bulgarian, right? That's the only reason. There are ways to get this up, and this is really not something you'll be concerning yourself too much with. Mostly it's been set up all right for all these guys, and then it's artists and works of art that increase certain prestige and stuff like that in your country. Once again, not too relevant. It is an excellent way to expand, the population mechanic, and obviously we would have something like this. Down here you have the breakdown, what percentage of the country there are, your opinion on this country and whatnot, that culture's opinion of your culture. You get the point. Primary tolerated, non-accepted, familiar concepts to us all. Then in the religion tab, your primary religion, your liturgical language, religious unity, conversion rate, any holy sites that we might have, a tolerance of own religion, heretics, heathens, all familiar things to us from EU4. And then obviously down here you would have any international organizations that might interact with your religion. For example, as Serbia, we are part of the Autocephalous Patriarchate of Constantinople, which all of these guys that are outlined are in. Bulgaria's got its own one. Later as Serbia, you create your own one, and there you can also do some of those interactions with this right here. That right here is pretty much this right here. And then in the people tab, you can see, how the promotion rate, basically how much people rise up from a certain layer of your society to the other, how peasants can become burghers, how they can become clergy members, how they can, well, I guess become nobles and whatnot. Your characters right here are pretty much like your ruler, his family, the cabinet members and whatnot. Your population growth, obviously it's 0 right now because we haven't unpaused. If people get demoted, separatism, rebel growth, if people are migrating in or out, the literacy and stuff like that. So all cool stuff to interact with right here. And of course you have the breakdown with a sort of a donut chart right here. Next over here, we're in the diplomacy screen where you can see all your relations, the international organizations that you may or may not be a part of, your diplo capacity that I mentioned earlier, and your diplomatic reputation, familiar concepts to us. Now, I have sort of a mixed opinion on this diplomacy screen right here, I guess because we're so familiar from EU4 to just click on your own country and see the diplomatic actions. Sorry, not on your own, but click on any country and see all the actions we can do from them. If we scroll over a little bit right here, we can see that they're divided up in friendly, hostile, covert, economic, access, and subject, which are kind of similar to what we have in EU4 already, except, with the exception of some like great power stuff and whatnot, but it's mostly the same. Now, something I don't like about this is that they're not intuitively lined up. They're in alphabetical order, right? And we're so familiar from EU4 that you got alliance and royal marriage right here, and it's always right there. It's just sort of strange. Now, when you open this up, for example, you got all of these things, and then it takes you to all the countries that you can do those interactions with, and you got the numbers to see how many countries you can do those interactions with and whatnot. But then, for example, if we click on Bulgaria, and we got offer alliance right here, and then we want to ally them, and then we want to break the alliance with them, it's sort of weird to have to go then to hostile actions to break the alliance with them, right? For example, offer alliance and break alliance aren't the same button like they are in EU4, which is not something I like. Also, it's weird that you mostly do this here instead of clicking on a country, if that makes sense, compared to EU4. So I like this. I think all of the options are great. As we all know, and as everyone says, man, EU4 has got the greatest diplomacy system in any Paradox game. I think it is even better in EU5, especially with all the subjects and the international organizations and stuff like that. But my only problem with diplomacy in EU5 is this screen right here. It's just not intuitive to me. I know it's in alphabetical order, but it does make sense alliance to be first, right? Doesn't it? And then I don't think it should be a separate menu to break the alliance. I think it should be, if you have an alliance, the option be break an alliance. If you don't have it, offer alliance, but not a lot to say about, the diplomatic menu. There are some interesting ones too that I want to mention, like for example, you can block countries from building in our territory, and there are then peace deals to where you can force them to allow you to build in their territory. You can buy a location, as you can see. You can buy market access, embargo them, offer loan, request loan, and whatnot. There are definitely, the actions have been expanded quite a lot. I I think this menu could be done better, more intuitive, so to say. And then these are the international organizations. You can see our great power score. And for example, as Serbia, we can see the HRE, 329 members, the Ilkhanate, 92 members, the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, which most Orthodox guys will be a part of, the Tatar Yoke International Organization, which, you know, the Golden Horde leads and then taxes all of those Eastern Slav guys. Then you got the High Kingship of Ireland, the Gilefs and the Ghibellines, which are sort of the Italian guys beefing if they want to side with the Pope or with France. All of these international organizations have unique mechanics for themselves, and they do work in a pretty cool way. And then, of course, you can see some minor ones right there, like the Swiss Confederation, for example, or that other patriarchate that only Bulgaria is a part of. So these are all of the ones we can see, and all of them have unique mechanics. Then we move on to the military tab, ladies and gentlemen, which, you know, does your army and navy and stuff like that. Let me see if I stop hovering over that a little bit right here. Yes, there we go. So obviously we got army morale, navy morale. We don't have armies or navies, so it's 0 right now. Army experience, tradition, discipline, the tactics, you know, a lot of modifiers, let's say, that might work a little bit different right here, but that are mostly familiar to us from EU4. Now, the way fighting works at the start of the game, or the way you recruit armies, is you pretty much don't. Some countries can have a standing army at the start of the game. For example, like the Ottomans, you could also build a standing army after the professional armies institution shows up, which is only a couple of years after the start of the game. But even then, you need to build certain buildings. So certain countries start off with the ability to build a sergeantries. If you can't build a sergeantry at the start, that means you're going to have to wait for professional armies, then you're going to have to research the armory, and then you can build up a professional army. Not a lot of guys have professional armies at the start, and it's not even that worth it to build them at the start, even though they're way more powerful than levies, for example. But yeah, the main way you do wars with most of these guys right here is with levies. Now, you do got to keep in mind that when you raise the levies, these are actual people from your country, right? It's not magical people appearing from nowhere. And when these guys do join your levy to go off to war, and previously they were working in a factory or something, that does mean that if these guys end up dying, which of course a lot of them will, you'll lose those spots in the army, right? Not in the army, sorry, in the factory. Those guys won't be working there. They'll die. Maybe there'll be no one to replace them, right? So it does impact the economy when you go to war. When you got such small levies, let's say 3,500 here at the start isn't really that much from 1,080,000, but you get the point of how it impacts the game. Those are actual people that stop doing whatever they were doing to go to war with you. More on regulars later. And then, of course, you have mercenaries. Mercenaries are really powerful at the start of the game since they are professionals, but they're also really, really expensive. Let me see if I scroll further in mercenaries right here. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But yeah, that's pretty much what I was talking about. I'm going to get back to that later. But you recruit a mercenary leader, and then that mercenary leader has the ability to gather his band of buddies and for them to go to war with you. An example I'll give you, which I mentioned in the main video as well, is me and Lath played as two super tiny nations in the HRE. Worms, which is this guy right here, and Spire, which you can't even see them due to this button right here. To give you an idea of how powerful mercs are, we went to war with the Palatinate, Brabant, Brandenburg, Austria, Upper Bavaria, which is the Emperor, and Lower Bavaria, and another small guy right there. But our levy recruitment was on cooldown. We didn't realize that, so we couldn't get our levies up, right? So we were like, okay, we got to do mercenaries. Combined, we had about 2,000 mercenaries between me and him, and we absolutely destroyed all of these other super powerful guys that brought in like 12, 13,000 levies just because they kept sending them in small batches, and our, 2K stack of mercenaries could easily beat back 5,000 or 6,000 levies. That's the difference between how strong professional guys are and just some farmers with pitchforks that you dragged out of the field to fight for you. So that's pretty important in the early game. And then, of course, here are some certain units that can be recruited at the start of the game. These are pretty much the early game guys. You got footmen, you get archers, and these are all of the bonuses or negative things that they bring in. This is how much they cost, how much manpower they cost as well. We obviously, since these are not grayed out, you would think we can build them as Serbia, but we really can't since we don't have a sergeantry yet, although we could build a sergeantry as Serbia. Then moving on, we got the Serbian Hussars, which are a unique unit. For Serbia, you got the horsemen, the armored horsemen, and then the camp followers. Obviously, most of these guys engage in battle, but camp followers are also pretty relevant. You see this little wagon icon right here for supply, for supply lines, supply limits, for logistics and stuff like that. So let's say you make up I don't know, like a game plan. Okay, I'm playing as Serbia and I'm gonna rush pest to siege down Hungary and make them capitulate. Not really, this isn't Hoi 4, but, you know, get their capital immediately. However, if you do take your entire army and sort of rush pest immediately, let's say there's no forts in between that, these guys will be so far away from home, their morale will be super low, there'll be no food. So the way you want to conquer stuff is generally gradually, right? You want to have conquered provinces behind you when you move forward so you have supply. But going back to the strategy I just mentioned, for example, you want to rush pest, you want to get these guys right here, which these guys bring in food and stuff like that with you, so your guys won't attrition and die of starvation. So I do like that concept a whole lot. And as you can see, our army size is 0, and we have recruitment buildings up here, which enable us to recruit professional armies. Same deal with the navies, pretty much. You pretty much use levy navies at the start, although nations with actual boats will absolutely slaughter you. And there's the sergeantry building I was talking about. Some countries can build it at the start of the game. You can only put it down near the capital. And for example, as Serbia right here, we could have a professional army of just 100 people because we can only build one sergeantry in our capital. Later, when you unlock the armory and stuff like that, you can increase it. And then over here, we have the military objectives, which are sort of automations for your army. They work really well. The best feature, obviously, you know, you can take a look at these right here. They're pretty self-explanatory in what they do, but the carpet siege mechanic is absolutely insane. You take your little army right there, you select it, you tell it to carpet siege, and they just spill it off. They're like, if you open up a little dome of ants or spiders or something like that, and they go scattering around everywhere and start carpet sieging. It is dangerous, since right now they're not that smart to avoid enemy armies, but of course that'll get way better by the time the game releases, and I think this will be so used. So thank you, Paradox, for finally adding a carpet siege automation. I'm definitely going to be using that one a lot. Then we move on to the geopolitics tab, and right here, as we can see, we got expansion, maritime, and diseases. Now, this is most for colonizations. As we can see, we know 27% of the world. Our colonial range is 1,000. We don't have any exploration cost or progress right now, or characters. We can colonially migrate, cost of colonies. And as you can see, every country anywhere in the world, well, as long as you got a coastline, I guess, or are next to uncolonized provinces, you can colonize and explore. As you can see, it'll take us 87 months to explore the Azores Sea, which is, you know, just southwest of Portugal and whatnot, but it's extremely expensive, right? And building colonies right now is extremely expensive. Even though, since everyone can do it, obviously you're not gonna do it with everyone. I mean, you can do it with everyone in EU4 too, but would you ever colonize as, I don't know, Serbia? Yeah, maybe sometimes. In fact, I've done it in A to Z, which is kind of funny, but still, the colonizers will still be the colonizers, although it's nice that everyone can do it, even though it's just super expensive at the start. Then we move on to the diseases right here, basically how many people have died from a disease, or population, disease resistance, and all of these are ones that could show up at any time. Obviously, the bubonic plague is gonna hit us hard in about 10 years right here, but all of these pop up from time to time. Usually none of them are too serious, at least from what I've seen, so there is a way to deal with all of these, and you will be starting to prepare for some of these for the Black Death. Now, the Black Death, interesting, man. We all know it spawns in 1346 from like this one province right here. You do have the ability to play it without it, and you do have the ability to set it to spawn in a random year and in a random location as well. So those are some interesting concepts to me, because, you know, most of us, I think, are going to play with the Black Death on, and we're going to play with it on in 1346 in that location that it spawns in, so historic. But then that does mean that we're preparing for the bubonic plague, right? Like, we know it's coming, but then at the end of the day, you know, other stuff are happening as well. So is that really how it works? I guess the best way to play it, or the most realistic, would be to set it to spawn in a random location in a random year, so you don't know when to prepare for it, but even then you would be preparing for it. And, you know, like I said, there are certain things you can do with the Black Death. You can lock off your country from the rest of the world. You can stop trading on other markets. You can procure remedies. You can send your court in isolation. You can find culprits. And there are interesting things you can do with it too that aren't directly related. For example, the find culprits mechanic when the Black Death starts makes you you know, expel foreigners or guys that aren't your religion, like that, persecute them just because they're different, because it's always the different guys that brought the disease, isn't it? So there's cool things to do in there as well. But yeah, that's just a part of the diseases thing. The bubonic plague, of course, in and of itself is a situation. Then we move on to the advances tab right here, ladies and gentlemen. As we can see, we are currently in the age of traditions, and we've researched 63 out of 86 of them. We do start off with some of them researched. This is our queue. Feudalism, legalism, and meritocracy are the what you call it, institutions in this age right here. We got feudalism, we got legalism. We don't have meritocracy. Only Asian nations have meritocracy, although you do get it a couple of years after the start of the game. It does spread. And over here, we can see the two things we can start researching on. However, if you open all of this up over here, it does take you to the advances tree, ladies and gentlemen, which in my opinion is one of the most important mechanics, top 3 for sure in EU5. So to break it down for you, the advances tree replaces national ideas, idea groups, and technology from EU4. It's all in one. And as we can see, in the age of traditions right here, we have certain things that are already researched for us from the past, let's call it, like shipbuilding, mining, the written alphabet. Organized religion is something we can research if it's glowing, and then gray things we can't research because we don't have that institution. For example, all of this is researched, this is what we're gonna research, and this is what we're gonna research when we get meritocracy. And you can see all of the institutions right here, the progress, and other stuff. It gives us bonuses too. So there are a couple of unique ones right here. Every country has unique ones over here, and I'll get into that very soon right here, but this is the example I want to show you. For example, this is the universal Christianity one that gives us 0.05 monthly diplomats. We get this one specifically just because we're a Christian nation. As you can see, the religion group is Christianity. Then you got other unique ones like this one that are available to us just because we're a monarchy. The purple ones are obviously the unique ones or the semi-unique ones. So that's where the sort of national ideas comes in, or the idea or the tech or whatnot, whatever you want to call it. And in this mission, in this advances tree, you'll pretty much have unique advances based on what. So for example, this one is unique to us just because we're Orthodox, right? Tolerance of the true faith, monthly legitimacy and stuff like that. And then of course we do have unique ones just because we're Serbia, home of the Hussars, for example, cavalry power, and that unit type. And as you can see, that's already researched for us. So that's why we can already recruit the Serbian Hussars unit type. So that's where everything is, man. Most of these obviously will be generic, although every country with flavor does have its own advances right here. And like I just said, based on the religion group, the culture group, and the government type and stuff like that, it's all the same throughout all of these various ages right here, that you get into it. Each age has branches stemming from its institutions, and then once each age starts, you can either choose to go an admin focus, a diplo focus, or a mill focus, which will open up an additional branch for you to research based on what you chose your focus to be. As we can see, there are 6 ages, and all of those ages, there are 3 institutions. So some of them you could spawn, some of them you can't, but you're gonna have to embrace all of them eventually. So that's pretty much one of the other most important mechanics in EU5, along with the cabinet and along with the values, in my opinion, the advances tree. And then finally, to touch on another system that I think is a really, really, really good addition to EU5, man, and that is the automation. I mentioned this at the start. Obviously, whatever you don't choose at the start, the game will automate for you. But for example, you have Conqueror, Explorer, Trader, and Gardener. As we can see in Conqueror right here, it only does army and navy construction for you. Pretty much no need to automate this. Then in the Explorer, it'll do the exploring and colonizing for you. In the Trader automation is in my opinion, one of the more important ones, because you have the balance, the trade, production methods, and building methods. And, for newer players, like I said in the other video as well, I do recommend automating the trader, so it's just a little less intimidating. Keep in mind that right now, the game prioritizes for the automation different things to what you might prioritize, right? So for example, if you automate trade, like we talked about trade earlier, the game will make trades in order to fill the population needs, whereas you would make trades in order to make the most money, right? So automation is excellent, but you want to be careful how and when you use it. Obviously, it's excellent for huge nations like, I don't know, you're playing Hungary. Well, maybe not Hungary, but someone like, I don't know, like the Yuan or the Golden Horde, the biggest nations in EU5. You would want to automate some things as these, because let's be real, you're not going to take the buildings and go location by location to do all of those buildings right there. So it's not a bad idea. You can't see it because it's behind me right here, but to automate perhaps building and production methods, right? And then you can do the balance and the trade yourself. But even if you do start off EU5, I don't know when you're watching this and if things have changed by then, of course, but I would recommend automating trade, but turning off the balance and then turning off the trade so you can focus on those things yourself, but then you can turn on back trade. So yeah, automation, really good, man, to make the game a little easier to play since it's so granular and eventually you're going to have huge empires. I just hope there's a way for the game's automation to prioritize what you also prioritize. So for example, if this could be expanded on, you want to automate a trade, let's make it focus on, you know, sort of revamping the country after a devastating war. Okay, let's get all the guys food or whatnot. Like, let's say we focus on trade, but do what the pops need. Focus on trade, automate it, but do maximum income, you know? So if there was a little more in-depth right here, things that you could do, I would be super happy. But even now, it's really, really good. I think automation is an excellent, excellent addition to EU5. Then before moving on to the map modes, I want to touch on certain things that the community, you know, has expressed when looking at this flat map or whatever it is. See, the map actually looks like this, man. I just play with a flat map always on and no tilting because I do not like the tilting and stuff like that, and I don't want these things to be transparent. I like the, you know, flat, political, opaque map a lot more, but this is what it would look like in a normal playthrough. And some people I was seeing armies look like underwhelming. There's no units on the map. There's no units on the map because I'm so zoomed out, for example, in the wars that I showcase, but units are on the map. Trust me, there are units, right? They do look pretty nice. And yeah, just a little bit an opinion here on the map mode. I think it's great. If we go into the naked map mode completely, you'll see right here, I think it does look pretty good. Some people were complaining that cities are too big on the map. Paradox has already said they will shrink cities, so we're good on that. And yeah, I think that map looks pretty good, but this right here, just personal preference, man. Now, as for the coloration, yeah, sure, the colors don't pop as much, and the text isn't as impactful. Keep in mind, I do play EU4 with graphical map improvements, so that does make the colors, you know, brighter and the borders thicker. And yeah, I would like black borders, by the way, so, but those are just nitpicks, man. And if you want the map to look different, there's gonna be a million map mods when EU5 comes out, and I'm sure there'll be something for everyone, although I do like the flat base map right here. That is the way I would play. Moving on to some map modes right here that I showed off in the video, just to touch a little bit more on them because I just, you know, showed them off in the video because we didn't have time. This is the integration map mode, and this is pretty much provinces or locations that are your cores or aren't cores, you know? So as we can see, everything that's green is a core, but interestingly, even if you do end up integrating a province, it doesn't like instantly become your core. It's sort of like through events and stuff like that. I've only noticed that when playing as the Ottomans, but things will eventually get 100% integrated, and they will eventually become 100%, you know, your core. Then we have the raw material map mode right here. I have no idea why it's third, and by the way, you can't, something I don't like about the map modes. When you pin them, you can't move them left or right. They pin themselves down here based on what group of map modes they come from. For example, I would never put raw material as the third map mode. That's just where it puts itself. So if we could move these left and right, that would be awesome, man, because I really want to set them up like they are in EU4. But yeah, this is the raw goods map mode. Not a lot to say right here. As we can see, we can definitely notice how granular it is and how many of them there are. Then we move on to the control map mode. I already explained this when we were in the cabinet actions. White in your capital is always 100 control. Everything away from your capital is less control, and I mentioned ways you can increase that by building roads, by building buildings, by using cabinet actions and whatnot. And then we have the proximity map mode, which is pretty much similar to the control map mode in a way that it tells you how close everything is to your capital. White one is obviously your capital. Everything that's closer to green is closer, and you'll have more control in. Everything that's red is further away. This is pretty much like control, but without the numbers, although not always the same. Then we move on to the roads map mode. As you can see, there aren't too many roads at the start of the game. You got this road right here out from Constantinople, and then you have it from Constantinople up to like Belgrade-ish, for example. Some roads in Anatolia. There are some right here in Italy, as we can see, and some in the HRE. You do want to be building roads. It's pretty important. There are different types of roads, starting all the way from the dirt road to a railroad. There are 4 different ones of them, and that's awesome. You will want to build these. It is pretty important for army movement. Obviously, it's faster, and it does increase proximity to your capital. It does increase control. So what I would recommend once you get money to build up roads at the start is building roads in between your your biggest population centers. For example, you would want to build one from Prizren right here to Niš as Serbia, then to Skopje down here, then to Ohrid, so you can get connected to these. If you expand, let's say, I don't know, up here, you would want to build a road to over there, so you increase control, you bring it closer to your capital, basically making it, you know, shorter to travel there. So there are great ways to do roads, and you do sort of want to focus on them quite a lot especially for controlling the early portion of the game. And obviously, I guess upgrading them later on down the line will be super important as well. But yeah, roads, very important and an excellent feature, if I say so myself. Then we have the culture map mode. Not too much to say right here. This map mode has been shown off quite a lot in the dev diaries. You got your religious map mode as well, diplo map mode, area, and naked and stuff like that. These have all been shown off in all the dev diaries, and there's really not that many things that we can break them down for. Now, to wrap it up, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to touch a little bit on warfare, not, armies specifically, like we went into that tab. So over here in this portion of the video, I am at war with Byzantium as Serbia right here. You can notice even a battle right there, all of these guys and whatnot. Something I really like about the wars over here in EU5, especially with how granular the map is and with all of these locations, is that we don't have to occupy every single location. I think that's excellent, especially with the fact there are like 30,000 of them or whatever it is. You will notice on the map right here these little black dots. Now, that location with a black dot, it means that that's a province capital. And for example, if we occupy that location with the black dot, all of the other, or most of the other locations within that province, their control of it will transfer over to us, even if there is or isn't a fort right there. So that means you can just, if you're doing a conquest-based war, or if the CB is conquest, you can zorp around in between these black dots, and that'll transfer occupation of the entire province over to you. Something else we should note right here is that locations with this little square on it, a little black or a white square, that means that there is a fort there. Forts are quite a lot more common in certain areas than in EU4, and it is pretty cheap to build them. And even the estates, or sorry, if you automate the game will automatically build forts for you in locations that it thinks are advantageous. I noticed this most when we were playing, those HRE miners with late, like I mentioned. We just turned on building automation to see what the game would do for us, and the game put down a couple of very strategically placed forts for us, which of course enabled us, to win that massive war that we were fighting versus a bunch of those guys, because sieging is about as fast as it is in EU4, I would say. It's pretty much the whole system. It starts from negative something, and, there's a chance to capture the fort later on. So yeah, that's one thing I like about wars quite a lot right here, that you don't have to occupy every single province, every single location, sorry, because it's so granular. And also, you'll notice right here, this is all I've sieged, and I fought like 2 battles and won them, and we're already good to peace out versus Byzantium and take all of this right here. So wars are a lot shorter. I like that quite a lot. And wars, at least right now, they don't seem to be all-out wars. Like, for example, I don't know, if you're fighting small guys, like if these 2 guys are fighting each other, obviously you're going to occupy, if you're Saruhan, you're going to occupy all of Aydin because they're so small. But if 2 big guys like this fight each other, the wars aren't all out. As we can see, I didn't even need to go to the Byzantine capital, and to take this, I didn't even need to siege a single fort. Just to take something in a war, you do need to have occupied the province capital. That is something I'm going to mention. Not something I'm sure I like, but I think it's a good balance between having to take that, but not having to take a fort. Now, if the province capital is a fort, well, it is what it is. But yeah, super short war, as we can see. If we scroll back here to where I declare on Byzantium, let's check out the date right here. As soon as, there we go, it's November 1st, 1337. And by the time I actually get to peace out, it's 16th May, 1338. So I did all of this in, what was it, November, December, January, February, March, April, and half of May. This I accomplished in 6.5 months, which I think is absolutely excellent. So I do enjoy warfare quite a lot. The only thing I can say I don't like about wars is it's actually kind of hard to grab onto the army, and with the map mode that I play in, and this is of my own doing, of course, it's kind of hard to see where you're sending them. I think for the province of locations, this little army thing doesn't scale well enough, to where you zoom in and zoom out, but that gets bigger or smaller. So I do think that is something maybe that should be worked on, but I do enjoy that quite a lot. Also, something I'm not a fan of is that there aren't window-specific actions in EU5. Like, for example, when you open up the army, when you select your army in EU4, you got like S to split it, V to split off one regiment, J to drill, blah, blah, blah. Those things aren't in EU5 window contextual shortcuts, and that's something I would like to see implemented, right? There are just generic shortcuts, and those shortcuts do the same thing all the time. And I'm really not used to like selecting the army, looking for the button to merge it, looking for the button to split it, where S and D are, so ingrained in the EU4 playstyle that I have. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything right here of this bigger breakdown of all the things that I could think to mention in EU5 right here, along with a better explanation and, my opinions on some of these things that I really like and really don't like. If I didn't mention anything, it's probably because I either don't have a strong opinion about it or I like, right? I didn't mention the notifications, more than once because I do like them quite a lot. I like the outliner a bit. I like that, it's in different colors. What's happening over here? I don't know, something else to think of, I guess maybe for a future video. But yeah, boys, like I said in the beginning, make sure to leave comments on this video with your questions about something that I haven't answered potentially, and I'll make sure to read all of those questions and answer them to the best of my ability in a future video. But yeah, ask away everything you want to know about EU5, and I will make a new video answering all of that. But yeah, aside from that, what's your opinion? What's your favorite thing about EU5 and your least favorite thing? Let me know that in the comments along with your questions. But that's it for me for now. See you next time.